I have spent my whole life teaching my eyes to lie to me. In the morning I understood that. My wife had already drawn the house 4 times. My name is Elias Marsh, and I restore paintings for a living, or I did, back when living meant something other than counting mornings. I am colorblind, not the charming kind where you mix up a sweater at a store, the deep kind, where the world arrives pre-drained. And I have trained 30 years of my life to read a canvas by value, by edge, by the ghost of a brushstroke, rather than the color everyone else swears is there. My wife, Nadia, used to laugh that I fell in love with painting precisely because I couldn't see it. She said I loved the thing I could never fully have. She was right about most things, which is the part that still keeps me awake. Nadia painted for herself, never sold a canvas, never wanted to. She taught 4th grade and painted at the kitchen table after grading, the radio low, her hair pinned up with whatever pencil was closest. I loved watching her work more than I loved any masterpiece I ever cleaned. So when she started drawing the same house 5 days before everything came apart, I noticed the way you notice a held breath in someone you have slept beside for 19 years. The first drawing appeared on a Monday. A narrow house, 2 stories, a steep roof, a crooked porch step, and a single dormer window like a half-closed eye. I asked her where it was. She said she didn't know. She said it just came out. Somewhere we went? I asked. We've never been there, she said. And then she looked at the paper like it had spoken to her instead of the other way around. I didn't think much of it. Artists chase a shape until they catch it. But Tuesday there was another, the same house from a different angle. Wednesday, a third, this time with a birch tree leaning over the roof line. Thursday, a 4th. And by then, I had stopped pretending it was ordinary, because the dates in the corner were wrong. She dated her work out of habit, tiny numbers in the bottom right. Thursday's drawing was dated Thursday, but I found it Wednesday night, before Thursday existed, tucked under her sketchbook while she slept. I stood in the kitchen, holding a drawing dated for a day that had not yet happened, and I told myself she'd simply written the wrong number. That is the thing about a lying eye. You get very good at explaining away what you don't want to see. Our daughter, Junie, was 7 then, and slept with her door open because she liked hearing us move around the house. That night I checked on her twice, which was 1 more time than usual, though I couldn't have told you why. I only knew the drawings had put a low hum in my chest, the kind you feel before a storm you can't yet smell. Friday morning, the hum got a face. I was at the front window with my coffee when the Delaney's dog, a fat old retriever named Biscuit, who had never run anywhere in his life, tore across their lawn and hit the end of his chain hard enough to yelp. Then I saw why. Mr. Delaney was standing in his driveway in his robe, and he was wrong. Not sick wrong. Wrong the way a painting is wrong, when someone has retouched it badly, the proportions almost right and the soul entirely gone. His head hung at an angle a neck shouldn't hold. His mouth worked at nothing. And when Mrs. Delaney came out and touched his shoulder, he turned on her with a speed that did not belong to a man of 70. I did not understand what I was seeing. I only understood that my body understood it before I did, because I had already set my coffee down and was moving toward the stairs, toward Junie's room, calling Nadia's name in a voice I didn't recognize as mine. Nadia met me on the landing. She had the sketchbook in her hand. Her face was pale and certain in a way I had never seen. And she said the thing that broke the morning in half. "Elias," she said, "I finished it last night. The 5th one. There's a door on the 5th one." Downstairs, Mrs. Delaney began to scream. And then she stopped. And the silence after was so much worse. We did not run at first. That is the part nobody tells you about the beginning of the end. There is a long, unbearable minute, where the mind refuses the evidence and demands a reasonable explanation. And in that minute, you waste everything. I pulled Junie out of bed with her stuffed rabbit still hooked in her elbow. Nadia was already at our bedroom window, watching the street with the sketchbook pressed to her chest like a second child. When I came in with Junie, she didn't turn around. "3 houses down," she said. "The Petersons' car is running, but nobody's in it, and the Halversons' front door is open. Nadia, we need to call someone." "I did." Her voice was flat, scraped clean. "There's a recording. They're saying stay inside. They said it 4 times, and then the line just gave a tone and cut." Junie pressed her face into my neck. "Daddy, is Biscuit okay?" I lied to my daughter for the first of what would become countless times. "Biscuit's fine, Bug. We're going to play a quiet game." Nadia finally turned. She opened the sketchbook to the last page and held it out. And for a moment, I saw it the only way I can see anything, in weights of gray and the confidence of a line. The 5th drawing was the same house, but closer now, framed as if the artist stood at the bottom of the porch steps looking up. And she was right. There was a door, dark, paneled, with a small window set into it at the height of a child's face. "I've never drawn this house before this week," she said. "I've never seen it. But I know the porch board on the left is loose. I know the door sticks unless you lift it. Elias, how do I know that?" I had no answer that wasn't insane, so I gave her the only true thing I had. "It doesn't matter right now. What matters is getting Junie somewhere safe." "This is somewhere safe." She tapped the drawing. "I think that's what it's been trying to tell me. I want to be honest about who I was that morning, because the man I am now owes everything to how wrong the old one was." I did not believe her. I believed in canvas and pigment and the visible world, even a visible world I could only half see. I believed that a house appearing in dreams was fear wearing a costume, and that the sensible thing was to drive to my brother Cole's place across the river, a man with a full garage and a shotgun and no imagination whatsoever, which in that moment sounded like the highest possible virtue. "We go to Cole's," I said. Nadia looked at me for a long, level second. "You don't believe me." "I believe you're scared. I believe I love you. I believe we go to Cole's." She closed the sketchbook. She didn't argue, which should have frightened me more than the screaming had. Nadia argued about everything, from the correct way to load a dishwasher to whether a painting was finished. When she stopped arguing, it meant she had moved somewhere I couldn't follow, and she was deciding how much of me to bring with her. We packed in 6 minutes. Water, the first aid box, Junie's inhaler because the smoke from a burning car 2 streets over was already thickening the air, a duffel of clothes, the cash from the coffee tin, and the sketchbook, which Nadia slid into her bag without asking. I grabbed the tire iron from the hall closet because it was the closest thing to a weapon a man like me owned. The garage door was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It rolled up like an announcement, and in the gray rectangle of morning, it revealed our quiet street transformed into something out of the paintings I restored. The ones full of judgment and fire, except drained of every color, and therefore, to my eyes, exactly as monstrous as it truly was. There were 6 of them on the street. I recognized 4. That was the detail that nearly stopped my heart. That I could put names to the things now shambling between the parked cars. Neighbors. People whose mail I had carried over when it came to us, by mistake. Junie whimpered. Nadia buckled her into the back seat with hands that did not shake, and I understood, watching her, that my wife had been preparing for this for 5 days, without either of us knowing what she was preparing for. I backed the car out too fast and clipped the recycling bin, and the crash of it turned every ruined head on the street toward us at once. They came the way water finds a crack, without hurry and without stopping. I had imagined, in the half second I'd had to imagine anything, that they would be slow. Some were. Old Mr. Delaney lurched, but the Peterson boy, 19 and a track runner 3 days ago, came off his porch at a dead sprint, and the sound Nadia made beside me was not a scream, but a sharp intake, the sound of a plane meeting reality. "Go right," she said. "Not toward the highway, right. Coles is left. Elias, go right." I went left. I want that on the record too, all of it, because the accounting matters. I went left because left was the map I knew, and knowing the map felt like safety. And safety was the last thing left is designed to give you in a world that has stopped following maps. We made it 4 blocks before the road knew better than I did. A jackknifed delivery truck lay across both lanes where Miller Street met the boulevard. And around it, a knot of stalled cars, some empty, some not, some with people inside pounding on windows, and some with things inside doing the pounding. I stopped. I reversed. A minivan had rolled up behind us, driven by a woman I didn't know, her face a mask of the same disbelief I'd worn an hour ago. And behind her, the street was filling. "Right would have taken us to Ashbury," Nadia said quietly. "Ashbury connects to the county road. The county road is empty this time of morning. I drive it to the school." I looked at her. "How do you know it's empty right now?" "I don't. I know it's usually empty. That's all any of us know about anything, Elias. What it usually does." She reached back without looking and put her hand on Junie's knee. "But the house isn't on any road I recognize. It's on no road. That's the part I can't explain and the part I trust most." We abandoned the boulevard. I turned us into the residential grid, and Nadia navigated from a knowledge she shouldn't have possessed, calling turns before I reached them. And I told myself she just knew the neighborhood. She taught here. She drove these streets. And none of that explained how she knew the chain-link gap behind the shuttered hardware store that let us cut through to Ashbury without ever touching the boulevard at all. Junie was crying without sound in the back seat. The worst kind, the kind children learn when they sense that noise is dangerous. I caught her eyes in the mirror. "You're being so brave, Bug. Braver than Daddy." "Where are we going?" she whispered. Nadia answered before I could. "To a house Mommy dreamed. It has a birch tree and a porch and a room at the top that's just the right size for you." "Is it real?" Nadia was quiet for a moment. Then, "We're going to find out together." Ashbury opened up ahead of us, and for one merciful stretch it was empty. Just morning light and abandoned lawn sprinklers still ticking through their cycles because no one had told the timers the world was over. I let the car breathe up to 50. Beside me, Nadia opened the sketchbook to the first drawing and studied it, then the second, laying them side by side in her lap like a detective who had finally been handed the case file. "They're not the same angle," she said, half to herself. "I've been thinking they're the same house from different sides. But they're not. They're the house at different times. Look, this one has the birch. This one doesn't. The birch grew or it fell. These are years apart. You're saying you drew the same house across decades of its life. I'm saying I remembered a house I've never seen across decades I never lived." She pressed the heel of her hand to her forehead. Unless I did, and I don't know it. The county road appeared where she said it would. a gray ribbon peeling off between two dead fields. And I took it, and the last houses of our life fell away behind us. In the rear view, our town smoldered in shades I would never see, and my colorblind eyes, for once, saw it truly. Ruin has no color. It is only the absence of everything that was. The county road ran for 11 miles into nothing. And somewhere in the middle of that nothing, I stopped arguing with my wife and started listening to her. And I've never decided whether that was the moment I saved us or the moment I surrendered. We passed a farmhouse with its barn on fire, and no one fighting it. We passed a school bus stopped crossways in a ditch. Its door folded open, its seats empty, a single small shoe on the road beside it, and Nadia put her hand flat over Junie's eyes. And I drove faster than I should have, on a road I didn't trust. Neither of us spoke about the shoe. Some things you carry silently or you don't carry them at all. "Pull over," Nadia said when the gas needle dropped below half. "Just for a minute. I need to think. And I can't think while you're doing 40 over a road full of gravel." I pulled onto the shoulder beside a collapsing fence. The engine ticked. The fields around us were the flat brown of late spring gone wrong. And the silence out here was different from the silence in town. In town, silence meant something had just stopped. Out here, it meant nothing had ever started. Nadia spread all 5 drawings across the dashboard. "Okay," she said, and her teacher voice came back, the one she used when a problem was hard and a child needed to believe it was solvable. "If I've never seen this house, the drawings are premonition, and premonition doesn't make sense, so I don't believe it. If I have seen it, then it's memory, and memory I can work with. Memory has a location. You'd remember seeing a house. Would I?" She turned to me. "Elias. My mother died when I was 6. I have exactly 4 memories of her, and one of them I'm not even sure is real or just a photograph I turned into a memory. There's a whole country of my childhood I can't get to. My aunt raised me and never talked about my mother, not once, my whole life, like she was a door painted over." I felt something shift, a plate under the surface of a thing I thought I knew completely. "You never told me it was that empty. You don't tell the man you love that half of you is a locked room. You just live in the half with the windows." She touched the first drawing, the one with the young birch. "But I think this is in the locked room. I think this is a house my mother took me to. And I think my body remembers what my mind was too small to keep." Junie leaned forward between the seats. "Grandma's house?" Nadia's breath caught. She had never called it that. But out of the mouth of a 7-year-old, the theory took a shape neither of us had dared give it. And I watched my wife receive her daughter's words like a coordinate. "Maybe, baby," she said. "Maybe Grandma's house." I looked at the drawings then, really looked, the way I look at a canvas when a client insists it's a forgery, and I have to find the truth in the paint. And I saw what my trained eye should have seen days ago. The drawings weren't invented. Invented houses have invented logic. Doors where doors look nice, windows for balance. This house had the wrong logic of a real place. A chimney too far to one side, a porch added later than the house, a window bricked half over. Nobody draws inconvenience from imagination. You only draw it from truth. "It's real," I said. "The house is real. I'd stake my career on it, for whatever a career is worth now." Nadia looked at me, and for the first time since the garage, something in her face loosened. Not relief, permission. The permission to not be crazy alone. "Then help me find it," she said. "You read paintings for a living. Read mine. Where is this?" I picked up the drawings, and I stopped seeing them as my wife's fear, and started seeing them as evidence. And the shift was physical, a gear catching. The light in every drawing fell from the same direction, low and from the right. The house faced east then, to catch a morning sun. The birch meant water nearby, a low, wet place. And in the fourth drawing, faint, almost erased, a line of hills behind the roof with a notch in them like a missing tooth. There, I said, pointing at the notch. That's not decoration, that's a landmark. Find those hills, we find the house. We found the hills at dusk, and finding them cost us the car. And losing the car cost us more than that. The notch in the ridge was real. I want to say that plainly, because everything that came after depended on a shape my colorblind eyes picked out of a child woman's grief drawing and matched to the actual skyline of the actual world. We came over a rise on the county road just as the light went long. And there they were, the hills with the missing tooth, exactly as Nadia had drawn them. And I heard my wife make a sound like a swimmer, breaking the surface. That's it, she said. Elias, that's it. That's the ridge. The house is under that notch. I know it. I know it. We've got maybe an hour of light. Then drive. But the road toward the ridge left the county route and turned to dirt. And the dirt, after a spring of rain, had gone soft. I felt the back wheels start to swim, corrected, felt them go anyway. We slid gently, almost politely, into the ditch, and the car settled at an angle that told me before I even tried the pedal that we were finished. The wheels spun and the engine whined, and the smell of hot rubber filled the cabin. And Junie started to cry again, the silent way, because she had already learned. It's okay, Nadia said, unbuckling. We walk from here. It can't be far. The house sits close to the ridge in the drawings, right at the base. You want to walk into unfamiliar country in the dark with a 7-year-old and no map. I have a map. She held up the sketchbook. I've had it for 5 days. I just didn't know what it was. I stood in the ditch beside the ruined car, and I made the last argument of my old self. Nadia. There could be nothing there. There could be a foundation and a chimney, and 40 years of nothing. We could walk all night toward a house that fell down before Junie was born, and be caught in the open when we could have stayed with the car, near the road, where someone might come. She came around the car and took my face in both her hands, the way she used to before I left for work. And in the failing light, I could see every line of her, the ones I'd watched arrive over 19 years. Nobody is coming, Elias, she said gently. You heard the recording. Stay inside 4 times, then a tone. That's not a rescue. That's a goodbye. There is no near the road that saves us. There's only forward, and forward is the house. And the house is the one thing in this whole ruined day that has wanted us to come. I have replayed that moment more than any other. The 2 of us in the ditch, the child crying in the car, the light going, and my wife asking me to trade the known world for a picture. And I understood, standing there, that everything I was, the man who read the visible surface and distrusted what lay beneath, had reached the exact edge of its usefulness. Beyond that edge was Nadia's country, the locked room, the mother she couldn't remember, the house that drew itself out of her hand. To follow her there, I had to lay down the only faith I'd ever had, which was faith in my own eyes. I laid it down. Get the bags, I said. Junie rides on my back. We follow your map. We left the car nose down in the ditch with the doors hanging open, and it looked, as we walked away from it, like every abandoned thing we'd passed all day. And I thought, that's us now. We're the abandoned thing. And then I stopped thinking that because Junie's arms were around my neck, and her chin was on my shoulder, and she whispered, "Daddy, I can see a house." And I looked up, and she was right. It stood a half-mile off at the base of the ridge, black against the last gray of the sky, 2 stories, steep roof, a single dormer window like a half-closed eye. Even at that distance, I could see the birch beside it, grown huge, decades past the sapling in the first drawing. The house was real. It was exactly as she'd drawn it. And a light was on inside. A light meant people. And people meant the second worst discovery of that entire day, which was that the house Nadia had dreamed for 5 nights was already someone else's home. We stopped at the edge of the yard. The birch loomed. Up close, I could see the porch, the added-on wrongness of it, the loose board on the left, exactly where Nadia had said. And I felt the ground tilt under everything I believed. She had known. She had never been here, in any life she could remember. And she had known. "There's someone inside," I whispered. Junie's weight had gone heavy and warm on my back. She'd fallen asleep between one field and the next, the way exhausted children do, dropping into rest like a stone into a well. Nadia stared at the lit window. Her certainty, which had carried us 11 miles and 1 ruined car and a half-mile walk through failing light, wavered for the first time. "It should be empty," she said. "In the drawings, it's always empty. Nobody's ever in it." Someone's in it now. We could have turned around. I've thought about that too. We could have found a barn, a shed, anything, and waited for morning. But there was nowhere to turn to. And the dark behind us was full of the country road, and the county route, and the burning town. And the only thing ahead with a light in it was the house. So we did what the drawings had been telling us to do for 5 days. We went to the door. The porch board creaked exactly as promised. The door had a small window at a child's height. I lifted it slightly on its hinges to keep it from sticking. And only after I'd done it did I realize Nadia hadn't told me to. My hands had known, the way hers had known, and the wrongness of that raised every hair on my arms. Before I could knock, the door opened. The woman who stood there was old, 70 at least, with white hair pulled back and a face carved by weather and grief into something both hard and unspeakably tired. She held a shotgun, but not pointed at us. Held it the way you hold a tool you've decided not to use yet. She looked at me and at the sleeping child on my back, and then her eyes moved to Nadia, and she went absolutely still. "Oh," the old woman said. "Just that. A small, cracked sound, like a plate set down too hard." "We're sorry," I started. "Our car, we didn't mean to." "Rosa," the old woman said, and she wasn't looking at me at all. She was looking at Nadia, and her eyes had filled. "You look just like your mother, God in heaven. You look just like Rosa." Nadia's mother's name was Rosa. I knew that much. I watched my wife's face come apart and reassemble around a truth arriving faster than she could hold it. "You knew my mother," Nadia said. "I'm your mother's aunt," the old woman said. "Your great-aunt, Theodora. You came here once, when you were 4 years old. Your mother brought you and stayed a summer, and then she took you away and never came back. And I never knew why. And then I heard she'd passed, and I thought that whole line of us was ended." Her hand tightened on the doorframe. "How did you find me? Nobody knows this house. It's not on any road that has a name." Nadia reached into her bag with shaking hands and pulled out the sketchbook. and she opened it to the first drawing. The house with a young birch. And she held it up to the porch light. "I drew it," she said. "Starting 5 days ago. I drew it every day, and I didn't know what it was. My hand knew. I think I remembered you. I think a part of me that was 4 years old remembered this exact porch and this exact tree. And when the world started to end, it woke up and it drew a map back home." Theodora looked at the drawing for a long time. Then she looked at the huge birch beside the house, decades older than the one in the picture. "That tree was a stick when you were here," she said quietly. "You couldn't have seen it grown, but you drew it grown." She stepped back from the door. "Come inside, all of you. Come inside before the dark finds you standing there." I carried my daughter across a threshold my wife had crossed 29 years before and forgotten. And behind us, the birch stood witness. And I understood at last that Nadia's drawings had never been prophecy. They had been the longest memory a body can hold, reaching forward to save us by reaching back. Inside, the house was smaller than its shadow, and full of a life I had to learn in a single night. Because by morning, it would be the only life we had. Theodora bolted the door behind us, 3 separate locks, and I understood she had been living braced for a long time, longer than the outbreak, the particular fortification of a person who has decided to be forgotten. She lit an oil lamp, and I saw the front room in grays and shapes, a wood stove, a wall of shelves, a table with 2 chairs, though she clearly lived alone, and everywhere, on every wall, paintings. I crossed to them without deciding to. It's a reflex 30 years deep. They were landscapes mostly, the ridge, the fields, the birch in a dozen seasons, and they were good, genuinely good, the confident wrongness of a real hand painting real places. And in the corner of each one, a small set of initials and dates, the way Nadia dated hers. "You paint," I said. "My whole life," Theodora said. "Rosa painted too. It runs in the women of this family like a fever. Her mother before her. Nobody sold a canvas in 4 generations. We just have to make the thing we see." She set the lamp on the table. "That child on your back paints yet?" Junie stirred as I lowered her onto the sofa. "She draws," I said, "all the time." "Of course she does." Theodora almost smiled. "Of course she does." Nadia had gone to the far wall, to a painting I hadn't reached, and she stood in front of it without moving. I came up beside her. It was a portrait, unusual among all the landscapes. A young woman with dark hair and a serious mouth, holding a small child on her hip. The child had a stuffed rabbit hooked in one elbow. "That's my mother," Nadia said, "and that's me." "I painted it the summer you were here," Theodora said from behind us. "From life. You sat still for maybe 4 minutes at a time, which is why you're a bit of a blur." She came and stood with us. "Your mother didn't want it. She said it felt like being pinned. When she left it behind. And I've kept it on that wall for 29 years, wondering if I imagined the whole summer." I looked at the rabbit in the painting, and then at the rabbit on the sofa clutched in my sleeping daughter's arms. 3 generations of the same small comfort. And something in my chest that had been clenched since the garage door rolled up finally let go. And I had to turn away so the 2 women wouldn't see my face. We talked most of the night. Theodora made a thin soup on the wood stove, and we ate it like a sacrament. She told us the house had no phone, no electricity except a solar panel and 2 truck batteries she'd rigged. That the light we'd seen was the last charge, and she'd been about to shut it off. She told us she'd heard nothing of the outbreak until we arrived. So far out was she from any road that mattered. She listened to what we'd seen with a face that took it in the way old people take in bad news, without the luxury of disbelief. "So it's the end," she said when we'd finished. "We don't know that," I said. "You do. You just haven't said it out loud yet." She refilled Nadia's bowl without being asked. "This ridge has water and a garden and a spring that never quit in 40 years. If the world's ending, it could end worse than here." I asked the question I'd been holding since the porch. Why did Rosa leave? If this place is this safe, if you're her family, why take a 4-year-old and never come back and never speak of it? Theodora's face closed like the door had. "That's the locked room," she said. "And I'm not the one who locked it, so it's not mine to open. But you're standing in the answer. This house doesn't just get drawn by the women in it." She looked at Nadia. "It gets drawn by them when they need to come home. Your mother drew it too, the last month before she died. My sister wrote and told me. Rosa filled a whole book with this house and never came. She ran out of time." Her voice cracked. "You didn't. You made it. That's the difference between you and every woman before you. You got here, and outside, far off down the invisible road, something screamed in the dark, and it was not an animal, and we all heard it. And the safest house in the world got smaller by a wall. The first of them reached the yard 3 days later, and by then we had almost let ourselves believe the ridge was too far for the dead to climb. Those 3 days were the strangest peace I have ever known. We fixed the loose porch board. I helped Theodora bring in the last of the winter greens from her garden and learned the geography of her survival, the spring, the root cellar, the smokehouse she hadn't used in years. Junie followed the old woman everywhere. And Theodora, who I think had forgotten how to be touched, let the child hold her hand as if remembering a language. Nadia painted. Of course she painted. But now she painted the ridge, the real one, the visible one. And I understood she was done drawing her way home. She was home. The map had delivered its cargo and become just a book again. I even slept. 2 whole nights, the deep kind. And on the 3rd day, I let myself think a sentence I should have known better than to think. Maybe we made it. Then Junie, who had been sent to the porch to shell peas, came inside walking very carefully and said in the small, quiet voice she'd learned in the car, "Daddy, there's a man at the bottom of the yard, and he's walking funny." I went to the window. One figure at the tree line where the yard gave way to the slope down toward the invisible road. Even at that distance in my graze, I knew the walk. Everyone knew the walk now. It was the walk that had emptied the world. "How did it get up here?" Theodora breathed. "There's no road. There's barely a path." "They don't need a road," I said. "They just need down to turn into up, and they'll come." By nightfall, there were 3. By the next morning, 7, spread across the tree line like a slow tide feeling for a gap. They didn't rush. They didn't seem to see the house clearly, but they drifted uphill, and each day the tide sat a little higher on the slope, and I understood we had not escaped the thing. We had only reached the last high place it hadn't flooded yet, and the water was still rising. Theodora had the shotgun and 11 shells. I had my tire iron and a splitting axe. Nadia had a kitchen knife she'd sharpened on the wood stove's iron edge, and a look I was learning to read. We were not an army. We were a colorblind art restorer, a 4th grade teacher, a 7-year-old, and a woman old enough to be done with the world. Defending a house at the end of a family's long memory against a rising sea of the dead. That night, we held a council at the table by lamplight. the way I imagine families have always held councils when the wolf reaches the door. We can't fight our way out, I said. And we can't fight them all here. 7 becomes 70. It always becomes more. Then we don't fight, Nadia said. We think. She spread a fresh sheet of Theodora's paper on the table and, in a strange completion of the week, began to draw. But this time, she drew the house from above. A plan. The yard, the slope, the tree line, the ridge behind. They come uphill because down became up. What if we make a different up? A stronger one? What draws them? Sound, Theodora said, and movement. And they'll walk toward high ground over low. I've watched them these 3 days. They pick the climb. I looked at the map my wife was drawing, and my mind, trained for 30 years to find the true line beneath the surface, found it. The ridge, I said, behind the house. It's higher than the house. If we could put something up there, sound and light, something that says here is the highest place, the most alive place. They'd climb past the house to reach it, Nadia finished. They'd walk right by us. And then, Theodora asked, you've drawn them up the ridge. The ridge is a dead end. You've just made a wall of them above us instead of below. Nadia's pencil stopped. She looked at the plan, at the ridge with its notch, the missing tooth I'd found in a drawing days and a lifetime ago. And she said the thing that would decide all of us. The notch isn't a dead end, she said slowly. You told me the spring never quits. Where does the water in the notch go, Theodora? On the far side of the ridge. Where does it fall? Theodora went pale. There's a drop, she said. Behind the notch, a long one. The spring runs off a cliff there. In 40 years, I've never gone near it. We had 4 days to build a lie the dead would believe. And we built it out of everything a forgotten house had saved for a reason none of us had understood until now. The plan was mine and Nadia's and Theodora's in equal thirds. And I want that recorded. Because in the telling afterward, people always want one hero, and there wasn't one. There was an old woman who knew the land. A woman who could see the shape of a thing before it existed. And a man who could tell a true line from a false one. Alone, each of us would have died on that ridge. Together we made something none of us could have made apart. And if survival taught me anything, it taught me that. The idea was simple to say and brutal to build. Draw them up. Not toward the house, but past it, up the slope to the notch, where the ground narrowed between 2 shoulders of rock into a natural funnel. And beyond the funnel, the drop Theodora had feared her whole life. If we could make the top of the ridge the loudest, brightest, most alive-seeming place on the mountain, the tide would climb toward it, single file through the funnel, and the funnel would hand them to the cliff. To make the lie, we needed sound and light that could run without us standing beside it, because standing beside it meant dying beside it. Theodora's 2 truck batteries, the solar panel, the last of the wire from her rigged-up lights, an old car horn she'd kept for reasons she couldn't name, the pack-rat instinct of the truly isolated. And light, which was the hard part, until Junie, sitting cross-legged and listening the way children listen when adults have stopped pretending, said, "Use the lamp that spins." Theodora blinked. "The what?" "On the shelf. The one that spins the light around. I played with it." It was an old battery lantern with a rotating reflector, the kind meant to be a warning beacon on a broken-down truck. Theodora had forgotten she owned it. Junie had found it in a week, the way children find everything. A slow, sweeping light, up on the notch, in the dark, moving like a living thing. We had 4 days because that was how long the tide took to reach the yard's edge in force. And on the 4th day there were more than 30 of them below the house, and we could wait no longer. I carried the batteries and the horn up the slope in the dark before dawn. Nadia beside me with the wire and the beacon, Theodora at the house with the shotgun, and Junie, because someone had to stay with the child, and it could not be me and Nadia both. And no one said aloud the thing we all knew, that whoever went up the ridge might not come down. The funnel was worse than the drawing. In gray light, it was a throat of rock, and the wind that came through it carried the smell of the drop beyond. Wet stone and long fall. We wired the beacon to a battery and set it in a cleft where its sweep would throw across the whole upper slope. We rigged the horn to sound in bursts, a relay Theodora had built from a windshield wiper motor and a cam, an old woman's genius born of 40 years of fixing things alone. When we threw the switch, the horn would blare and the light would sweep, and the top of the ridge would sing with the illusion of the living. And we would run. That was the whole of the plan's mercy. Set the lie, throw the switch, and run down the far shoulder before the tide arrived, back to the house by the low path, and bar the door, and let the dead climb past us toward a beacon calling them to a cliff. On 3, I said, my hand on the switch. Nadia grabbed my wrist. In the gray dawn, her face was fierce and frightened, and more beautiful than any canvas I'd ever cleaned. If it doesn't work, she said, if they don't climb, you don't come back up here for me. You go to the house. You get to Junie. Promise me. It'll work. Promise me the other thing anyway. I couldn't. I have never been able to lie to her face, only to my own eyes. Throw the switch, I said instead, and she looked at me a moment longer, and then she did. The horn tore the dawn open. The beacon began to sweep, and far below, 30 ruined faces turned as one toward the top of the ridge and began, terribly, patiently, to climb. We ran down the far shoulder in the dark with the horn screaming behind us. And halfway down, I learned that a plan can work perfectly and still take everything from you. The low path was steep and loose, and I fell twice. And Nadia caught me once, and I caught her once. And behind and above us, the dead were doing exactly what we'd designed them to do. Climbing toward the light and the sound. Dragging themselves through the funnel toward the cliff we'd offered them. I couldn't see the drop from the path, but I could hear it, faintly, under the horn, a change in the sounds, a series of them, that I made myself not think about, because they had been people, every one, and the lie we'd told them was the last thing anyone would ever tell them. We reached the house as the sky went from black to the gray that passes for dawn. To me, Theodora had the door open a crack, the shotgun through it, and she pulled us inside, and I heard Junie's cry of relief and felt her small body hit my legs, and I picked her up and held her so hard she squeaked. It's working, Nadia said, breathless, pressed against the bolted door. They're climbing, all of them. The yard's clearing, Theodora. Look, the yard's clearing. Theodora looked through the window at the emptying slope, at the tide draining upward toward the notch. And her weathered face did something I hadn't seen it do. It crumpled, and she put a hand over her mouth. 40 years I've watched that ridge, she said. I never thought it would save me. I thought it was just where the water fell. We should have been jubilant. The plan was working. But a plan that works by sending 30 dead neighbors off a cliff is not a thing you celebrate. And we stood in the dim front room and listened to the horn scream its lie up on the mountain. And no one spoke, because there was nothing to say that the sound wasn't already saying for us. Then the horn stopped. It didn't wind down. It cut mid-blare into a silence so total I heard my own heart. Nadia's head came up. "The relay," she said. "The cam. It jams sometimes. I saw it stick when we tested it. It stopped." "It doesn't matter," I said. "They're already climbing. They'll keep climbing toward the light." "The light needs the horn," Theodora said quietly. And my stomach dropped. Because she was right. Because we'd learned it in 3 days of watching, sound, and movement together. That the light alone would hold the ones already committed, but the ones still low on the slope. The stragglers, the slow ones, just now reaching the yard's edge. Those would lose the pull, and turn, and drift back toward the only other movement on the mountain, which was us, in the house, breathing. I looked out the window. The upper slope was full of climbers, still committed, still funneling toward the notch. But at the bottom, at the tree line, 4 or 5 figures had stopped. And as I watched, one of them turned its ruined face toward the house. "Someone has to restart the horn," Nadia said. "No," I said, before I even knew what I was refusing. "Someone has to go back up and free the cam. 2 minutes. It's a 2-minute climb to the cleft, and a 10-second fix, and a 2-minute climb back down. The stragglers haven't committed to us yet. There's a window." "Then I go," I said. "You can't see color," Nadia said, and it was not cruel. It was the flattest truth in the world, spoken by a woman doing arithmetic none of us wanted done. "The cam has a red pin and a black pin, and you have to pull the red one. I watched you not be able to tell them apart when we built it. You tried 3 times. In this light, you'll pull the wrong one and jam it worse, and you'll die up there for nothing. I can see the pins. It has to be me." The room held its breath. Theodora looked at the floor. Junie looked at her mother. And I looked at the one thing my eyes had never been able to give me. The difference between a red pin and a black one, and understood that my whole life's deficiency had walked me, step by step, to a morning where it would cost me the only thing I couldn't lose. I did not let her go easily, and I have made my peace with the fact that I let her go at all. But the peace is thin, and I do not press on it. "Take the low path," I said, because if I couldn't stop her, I could at least arm her with everything I knew. "The stragglers are in the yard, not on the path yet. Go up the shoulder, free the cam, come straight back down. Don't stop. Don't look at the notch. Don't look at what's up there." I know. She was already tying her hair back with a pencil, the gesture of 19 years, and it undid me. I built the thing. I know it better than anyone. Junie understood. Children always understand more than we let ourselves believe. She didn't cry or cling. She walked to her mother and held up the stuffed rabbit, the one from the painting, 3 generations old. And she said, "Take him. He's brave. He'll bring you back." Nadia took the rabbit. She knelt and held our daughter, and I heard her whisper something I wasn't meant to hear and didn't try to. And then she stood and kissed me once, hard, and said, "Bar the door behind me. Don't open it for anything until you hear the horn start again. When it starts, you'll know I'm coming." "Nadia, when it starts, count to 200. And if I'm not at the door, you take them south along the ridge to the spring, and you do not come looking for me. Say it back." I said it back. God forgive me, I said it back. Because she needed to hear that Junie would live even in the worst version. And giving her that was the last useful thing I could do. She slipped out the door, and I barred it, all 3 locks, and pressed my face to the small window at a child's height, and watched my wife run up the shoulder into the gray with a stuffed rabbit in her hand. The next 4 minutes were the longest of my life. longer than the whole day of the outbreak, longer than the years since. I counted her progress by the movement I could see on the slope. She reached the cleft. She crouched. The stragglers in the yard drifted, undecided, a slow wrongness feeling for the strongest signal. And one of them came up onto the porch, and I held Junie's face against my chest so she wouldn't see the shape at the small window. Wouldn't see the thing that had been someone's neighbor peering into the house that had wanted us. And then the horn started. It tore the morning open again, and the beacon swept. And on the slope, the stragglers' heads all turned upward as one, the pull reasserting itself. And the shape on the porch shambled back down the steps toward the light and the sound, drawn away, drawn up, and I nearly wept with the relief of it. She'd done it. She'd freed the cam. The lie was singing again, and the dead were climbing, and my wife was coming home. I counted. 1, 2, 3. I watched the cleft for her to rise and start down. She rose. I saw her stand. I saw her turn toward the path. And I saw the one thing none of us had drawn. A straggler, higher on the slope than we'd known. One that had climbed past the cleft before the horn died and been standing still in the silence, invisible in the gray, waiting the way they wait, between Nadia and the path down. She saw it too. I watched her stop. I watched her look at it, and then at the notch above, where the funnel narrowed toward the drop, where the whole tide was climbing away from her. And I watched my wife make a decision with her body that I understood before my mind would let me name it. She could not come down. The path was blocked, but she could go up. She could go up into the funnel with the tide, and if she went up, the straggler between her and the path would follow her up, would climb after the movement, and would take the stragglers still in the yard with it, every last one. All the stragglers that the horn couldn't fully hold. She could pull them all up the mountain behind her like a comet's tail, and clear the yard completely, and give us a clean run south to the spring. She looked back once toward the house, toward the small window where she couldn't have seen me, but where she knew I stood. She raised the rabbit, and then she turned and ran up into the notch, and the dead turned and followed her, all of them away from us, toward the drop. I did not take Junie south. I broke the one promise I'd made, and I will not pretend I'm sorry, because a promise made to save a child does not survive contact with a father's whole heart. I gave Junie to Theodora. I put my daughter's hand in the old woman's hand, and I said, "Take her to the spring. If I'm not back by full dark, you keep going and you don't stop." And Theodora, who had lost her whole family to a locked room 29 years ago and found a piece of it walk out of the dark 5 days ago, looked at me and understood, because she had spent her life on the wrong side of a door, and she was not going to make me stay on the wrong side of mine. "Go," she said. "I've got the girl. Go get your wife." I went up the shoulder with the axe. The horn still screamed. The beacon still swept. The plane still worked, doing its terrible arithmetic on the mountain. I climbed toward the notch through a slope smeared with the aftermath of the climb. And I made myself not look. And I could not entirely not look. And I will carry what I saw for the rest of my life, and I will not describe it. Because some sights are not owed to anyone. The notch, when I reached it, was empty. The funnel of rock stood silent, but for the horn behind me. The tide had gone through it. Beyond, the ground fell away into the drop Theodora had feared her whole life, and there was nothing on the near side of it, no dead, no living, no wife. I stood at the edge of the thing we'd built, and I called her name into the wind, coming up off the fall, and the wind took it and gave nothing back, I want to tell you I found her at the edge, that she'd stopped in time, that the tide went over and she didn't. I have told myself 100 versions of that morning, and in every one I changed the ending, and in none of them does it change. I found the rabbit. It was caught in the rocks at the lip of the funnel, on the near side, on the side of the living. Just the rabbit, 3 generations old, snagged where a hand had let it go, or thrown it, or set it down. I picked it up. I stood at the edge of the drop with my wife's whole family's rabbit in my hand, and I understood that she had come to the very edge with the tide, and had stopped, and had thrown the rabbit back onto the living side of the world, back toward the house, back toward Junie, a last drawn line, a last true mark, the only thing she had left to send. I did not go over the edge. I want that recorded too, because there is a version of me that wanted to, that stood at that lip, and did the arithmetic of a man with nothing and found the sum unbearable. But there was a 7-year-old walking toward a spring with an old woman, holding no rabbit now. And my wife had spent her last minutes ensuring that child would live. And to follow Nadia over the edge would have been to erase the meaning of the things she'd done. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I turned around. I turned my back on the drop, and I climbed down off the ridge with the rabbit in my hand. And behind me, the horn ran on, calling a mountain of the dead to a cliff. A lie that would keep working long after the woman who'd built it was past hearing it. I found Theodora and Junie at the spring at dusk. Junie saw the rabbit in my hand, and then saw my face, and she did not ask where her mother was, because she already knew, the way children know, the way she'd known to whisper in the car. She just came and put her arms around my legs and held on, and Theodora put her hand on my shoulder, an old woman's hand that had held nothing for 29 years, and the 3 of us stood at the spring that never quit while the light went. And up on the ridge the horn screamed on into the dark. And I thought, that's her voice now. That's the sound she left. And it's saving us still. We stayed. Where else was there? The house at the end of the family's long memory became the house at the start of whatever came next. And we made it a life, because a life was the only monument Nadia would have wanted. The horn ran 3 more days before its batteries died, and in those 3 days it emptied the whole slope, drew every straggler for miles up the ridge and over. And when it finally went silent, the mountain was clean in a way it never was again, because more always came, over the years, in 1s and 2s, drifting up from the ruined world below. But we knew the ridge now. We knew the notch, and what the notch could do. And we never let ourselves forget the price we'd learned it at. I want to say plainly what those first weeks were, because grief in a survival story usually gets 1 line and then the plot moves on. And Nadia deserves more than a line. I did not eat for a while. Theodora made me. I did not sleep. And when I slept, I dreamed in gray of a woman running up into rock. And I would wake with my hand reaching for a side of the bed that had a house, a state, a whole vanished world between it and me. Junie stopped speaking for 11 days. Then one morning, she took a piece of Theodora's paper and a pencil and sat down at the table where her mother had drawn the house that saved us. And she drew. She drew the birch. She drew it well, better than a 7-year-old should, the confident wrongness of a real hand. And in the corner, she wrote the date, the way her mother did, the way Theodora did, the way 4 generations of women in that locked-room family had done. And I understood that the fever Theodora had named the first night had not ended. It had jumped a generation and landed in my daughter. and my daughter was going to make the things she saw for the rest of her life. And some of what she saw was going to be true in ways none of us could explain. I learned the garden. I learned the smokehouse and the root cellar and the spring. My hands, trained 30 years to clean the surface of other people's visions, learned to grow food and split wood and mend a wall. And I found there was a mercy in it, in labor that asked nothing of my eyes but their honest weakness. Theodora taught me. She was 71, and she taught me how to stay alive in a house the world had forgotten. And in teaching me, she came back to life herself, an old woman who had decided to be done, and was not, after all, done. Others found us over the years. Not many. The ridge was hard to reach, and we kept it that way. But now and then, someone came up the low path half dead, and we took them in, because Nadia had run up a mountain to clear a path for strangers she'd never meet, and to turn away the living would have been to spit on the things she died doing. We made room. That became the rule of the house, unspoken and absolute. The house takes people in. It always had. It had taken in a runaway girl and her child 29 years ago, and it had taken in the child grown at the very end. And it would go on taking people in as long as there was a roof and a spring and a table. I asked Theodora once, years in, if she'd ever learned why Rosa left. Why the summer ended and the door locked and a mother took her daughter and painted this house on her deathbed, but never came home to it. No, Theodora said, and I've stopped needing to. Some rooms stay locked, Elias. You don't get every answer. You just get to decide what you do with the ones you get. She looked out at the ridge, at the notch, at the birch. Rosa couldn't come home. Nadia could. That's the whole story I'll ever have, and it's enough. It has to be, because it's what there is. I keep the sketchbook in a drawer by the bed. 5 drawings of the same house, dated across 5 days before the end of the world. One of them dated for a day that hadn't happened yet. I've stopped trying to explain it. My whole life I trusted only the visible surface, and the visible surface never once told me the truth that saved my family. My wife's hand did that, reaching back through a locked room to a summer she couldn't remember, drawing a map home. Junie is 16 now, and last spring she started drawing a house none of us have ever seen. And I've learned enough to be afraid in a different way than I once was. She showed me the first one on a Tuesday, the way her mother did, sliding the paper across the same table. A low house, 1 story, a wide porch, mountains behind it different from ours, taller, colder. She dated it in the corner. She said she didn't know where it was. She said it just came out. I did not tell her she was imagining things. I did not explain it away with my careful, half-blind reason. I have spent 9 years learning what that costs. Instead, I did what I should have done for Nadia the first morning, in the kitchen, with the coffee going cold. I sat down across from my daughter, and I looked at the drawing the way I once looked at paintings for a living, for the true line beneath the surface, and I said, "Tell me everything you know about it. Not where it is, what it feels like, what's wrong with it, what's real." And she told me. She told me the porch sagged on the left. She told me there was a well with a bad rope. She told me the mountains behind it caught snow into summer. And there was a woman there, old, older than Theodora, who painted. And I wrote it all down in the back of Nadia's sketchbook, under the 5 drawings that saved us, because I have finally understood what the women of this family are, and what my job is among them. I am the one who reads the map. I can't draw it. The fever skipped me the way color skipped my eyes. I was born to see less than everyone around me, and I made a life out of learning to read what my eyes couldn't hold. And it turns out that's exactly the man this family needed. Not a seer, but a reader. Someone to take the true drawings of the women who see too much and turn them into a road anyone can walk. Nadia drew the house. I found it. That was always the division between us, in art and in the end. And it's the division between me and my daughter now. Theodora died 2 winters ago. In her sleep, 81 and unafraid. We buried her under the birch, and Junie painted the tree for the grave marker. And in the corner, she put Theodora's initials and the dates. The whole span of her, 1944 to the year the world had stopped counting for everyone but us. The house has taken in 9 people over the years who stayed, and more who moved on. And it holds them all. And it held Theodora to the end. And it will hold me. I don't know if Junie's new house is a memory or a warning or a place she'll need to reach someday when this ridge is no longer safe. I've stopped needing to know which. Some drawings are prophecy, and some are the longest memory a body can hold, and some are grief reaching forward or back. And the trick I've finally learned is that it doesn't matter which. What matters is that when someone you love draws the same house day after day and can't say why, you don't explain it away. You get up. You find the hills with a notch in them. You believe the hand over the eye. I still have the rabbit. It sits on the shelf in the front room, below the portrait of Rosa holding a 4-year-old Nadia. Below a wall now crowded with Junie's paintings and mine, the honest weak ones, the reader's landscapes that never quite catch what the seers catch. Some nights I take the rabbit down and hold it, 3 generations old, 4 now that Junie has grown. And I think about the lip of the funnel, and the last true line my wife drew in the world, the rabbit thrown back onto the side of the living. We found the house last, out of everyone who ever drew it. Rosa drew it and never came. Nadia drew it and came just in time, and it cost her the coming. Junie was born inside the answer. And I, who couldn't draw a thing and couldn't see the colors of the world, I am the one still here to say what it all meant, which is the only kind of survival I was ever built for. Not the seeing, the telling, the keeping of the account. The map read aloud so the next one who has to run in the dark will know which way is home. Junie left this spring. She's 23 now. I've compressed the years the way memory does. But the leaving was slow and right, not sudden. She took 2 others from the ridge and a pack. And the drawing of the low house with the sagging porch and the bad well and the snow that stays into summer. And she went to find it because she'd drawn it 40 times and couldn't stop. And I taught her long ago that when the hand won't stop, you go. I gave her the sketchbook. All of it. Nadia's 5 drawings and my 9 years of notes in the back. The whole account of how a family survives by trusting the ones who see and being trusted by the ones who read. I kept the rabbit. Some things stay with the house. I stood on the porch and watched my daughter walk down the low path into a world I'll never see the far edge of. And I did not tell her to be safe, because safe was never what any of us got. I told her the only true thing I had, the thing I should have believed the first cold morning in a kitchen a lifetime ago. Trust the hand, I said. Read it careful. Find the notch. And when you get there, take them all in. She raised her hand, not a wave, just held it up, the way her mother did at the edge of the drop, the way this family says the things it can't say. Then she was gone into the trees. I'm the last reader of a house full of seers. I keep the account. I tend the birch. And I wait for the day some stranger comes up the path half dead, having drawn our ridge in a book they can't explain. And I get to open the door and say the thing this house has always said. Come in. We found it last, so you wouldn't have to.